To retire the A-10 Thunderbolt II, commonly known as the Warthog, the U.S. Air Force truly pulled out all the stops, experimenting with several different solutions. One soldier, after thoroughly reviewing the documents, discovered a surprising fact. Even the F-16, known for being a highly versatile fighter jet, once had a version developed for close air support missions. In a bold move, the U.S. Air Force decided to equip the F-16 with a 30mm cannon. This idea was truly wild and left many astonished. So, what's the story behind this decision? Let's explore the details to better understand this fascinating event. When it comes to powerful and intimidating 30mm aircraft cannons, the first weapon that comes to mind for many is the GAU-8 Avenger, a 7-barrel Gatling gun integrated into the A-10. This is not only one of the largest weapons, but also one of the heaviest, packing an incredible amount of power in the history of its use by the U.S. military. With an extremely fast firing rate and superior explosive rounds, the GAU-8 quickly became the primary weapon of the U.S. Air Force in anti-tank and armored vehicle destruction missions. As a result, the entire design of the A-10 was built around how to effectively carry and operate this cannon. In close air support (CAS) missions, compared to a wide variety of bombs, the standout strength of the GAU-8 is its precision in controlling its immense power. The 30mm cannon provides just the right amount of force, not too large to endanger nearby Allied forces, yet not too weak to be ineffective against the enemy. This allows it to destroy targets only a few hundred meters, or even a few dozen meters, away while ensuring safety. Through decades of testing on real battlefields, the A-10 proved to be an outstanding close air support weapon, almost unrivaled in this role. However, despite the A-10's impressive combat performance, only a few years after it began service, specifically around the 1980s, the U.S. Air Force began to feel dissatisfied with the aircraft. The root cause of this dissatisfaction can be traced back to 1947, when the U.S. Air Force separated from the Army to become an independent branch. At that time, the Air Force and Army signed an agreement in which the Air Force committed to maintaining a dedicated attack aircraft to support the Army from the air, compensating for the Army's agreement not to develop its own fixed-wing aircraft. In simple terms, the A-10 was created primarily to meet the Army's requirements, not something the Air Force truly desired. Although its ground attack capabilities were formidable, the biggest downside of the A-10 was its slow flying speed, which made it an easy target on the battlefield and raised concerns about its survivability. But that wasn't all. The core issue was that the U.S. Air Force did not have enough pilots to operate every type of aircraft in its fleet. Maintaining the A-10 fleet required them to allocate a group of pilots just to fly a single-purpose aircraft, which was seen as a severe waste of resources, something the Air Force could not afford. At the same time, thanks to the continuous development of fire control computers, fighter jets in the U.S. Air Force achieved significant accuracy when dropping unguided bombs. Moreover, they also had a wide range of precision-guided weapons, such as laser-guided bombs, television-guided bombs, and the air-to-ground Maverick missile. This was also a period of significant advancement in aviation electronics, which enabled new aircraft like the F-16 to excel not only in air combat, but also in ground attack missions. Initially designed as a lightweight fighter, the F-16 evolved into a versatile multi-role aircraft that performed well in all weather conditions. Therefore, the U.S. Air Force wanted to reduce the number of different aircraft types in its fleet, both to simplify logistics and training, and to leverage large-scale production advantages to reduce the procurement costs of each aircraft. For Air Force leaders, the F-16, with its superior multitasking capabilities, was clearly a much more attractive option compared to the A-10, which was designed solely for the dirt-chewing ground attack role. Furthermore, another reason the Air Force had a dislike for the A-10 was the development of tactical air defense systems. Although the A-10 had good defensive capabilities, it could not handle modern self-propelled artillery and increasingly advanced surface-to-air missiles from the Soviet Union. In this context, only high-speed aircraft would be able to survive on the battlefield. In short, from the perspective of the U.S. Air Force, continuing to maintain the A-10 was seen as an unnecessary waste. They envisioned a future where the multi-role F-16 would fully replace the A-10. However, although this idea sounded great, the Army, the direct beneficiary of close air support, disagreed. The Army did not place much trust in precision-guided bombs, preferring the simplicity and directness of 30mm cannon strafing runs. The sight of a barrage of shells ripping through targets was not only effective, but also highly exhilarating, boosting the morale of the troops. With no other choice to appease the Army, the Air Force decided to get to work. They thought, "You want a 30mm cannon to attack the ground? Fine, we'll put it on the F-16. And so, a unique version of the aircraft was born. In fact, the U.S. Air Force's idea was quite simple. If the Army wanted a dirt-chewing aircraft, then let the F-16 take over the CAS mission. The core of this plan was the GAU-13A cannon, a 4-barrel version of the GAU-8, which was successfully developed and integrated into the GPU-5A Vulcan gun pod. Like the GAU-8, the GAU-13 A fires heavy 30mm rounds, including armor-piercing anti-tank shells, capable of destroying any armored target on the battlefield. The difference was that it used a dual feed system, allowing spent casings to be returned to the storage compartment, and a reverse cleaning mechanism to remove unused rounds. Unlike the GAU-8, which used electric and hydraulic motors, the GAU-13A switched to compressed air, reducing its firing rate to 2,400 rounds per minute, but it was still a highly reliable weapon. Based on this cannon, the Air Force even considered developing an F-16 version optimized for CAS called the A-16 in the Block 60 configuration. The design had the 30mm cannon integrated into the fuselage, reinforced wings to carry anti-tank weapons, and additional armor on the fuselage around the gun pod. Without hesitation, they converted 2 F-16A Block 15 aircraft into A-16 prototypes. But with the compact build of the F-16, originally designed for air combat based on energy maneuverability theory, could it even carry a 30mm cannon? During testing, the Air Force discovered that the vibrations from the cannon when firing, as well as the flame blast from the gun, caused issues that could not be fixed, making the plan unfeasible. Undeterred, the U.S. Air Force turned to the solution of mounting an external gun pod on the F-16. The Vulcan gun pod was designed with 2 forward and aft stabilizing sections and a fuselage made of honeycomb aluminum, reinforced with rigid aluminum panels. It featured 2 NATO standard hooks, with a 762mm distance and a mount directly connected to the gun, which helped transmit the recoil forces from the gun to the aircraft frame rather than just the gun pod. This improved stability during firing and allowed the gun pod to be mounted under the F-16's wings. The Air Force quickly tested the external gun pod. In November 1988, the 138th Squadron of the 174th Tactical Wing of the New York National Guard transitioned from the A-10A to the F-16AB Block 10, becoming the first unit to use the F-16 for CAS, close air support. A total of 24 F-16s were modified to carry the Vulcan gun pod and were redesignated as FA-16, similar to the FA-18 Hornet. However, this modification still had issues. Compared to an internal gun, the external gun pod lacked the rigidity of its connection to the aircraft, resulting in lower firing accuracy. The A-10, designed to target specific points like tanks, required absolute precision. If the 30mm rounds spread out like shotgun pellets, hitting only a few rounds on a tank wouldn't cause significant damage. For the Army, this F-16 version clearly couldn't replace the A-10, and it was seen as a half-hearted solution from the Air Force. More importantly, the FA-16's fire control system wasn't reprogrammed for the gun pod, making it impossible for pilots to calculate the continuous point of impact of the rounds. They had to aim manually, much like during World War II, resulting in very low accuracy. In response to complaints from the Army, the Air Force had a backup plan. If this method didn't work, they turned to a more advanced solution, modifying 7 F-16C and 1 F-16B, equipping them with a pave penny laser targeting system and the 30mm Vulcan gun pod. The F-16B was further enhanced with an infrared targeting system and painted in European camouflage. But just as the Air Force was preparing to retire the A-10, the Gulf War broke out. In this brief war, lasting less than 7 months, the A-10 proved its superior value. It flew 8,755 sorties, primarily performing battlefield interdiction and close air support, firing over 5,000 Maverick missiles, more than 90% of the total used in the conflict. The A-10's reliability reached 94%, and its mission readiness rate was 87.7%. It destroyed at least 330 Iraqi tanks and armored vehicles, even downing 2 Iraqi helicopters. The A-10 also played a role in targeting for other aircraft. Notably, only 5 A-10s were shot down, and 14 out of 15 damaged aircraft were repaired. Its defensive capabilities were clearly demonstrated. On February 15, 1991, an A-10 piloted by Captain Paul Johnson was hit by a shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile that tore off a 9-meter section of its wing, yet it still managed to fly back to base safely. Thanks to its excellent performance, the Iraqi military dubbed the A-10 the P-51 Mustang because it could fly for hours overhead, searching for targets and unloading 30mm rounds, shredding Iraqi tanks. Many reports indicated that when the A-10 appeared, Iraqi tank crews often abandoned their vehicles and fled. After the war, the A-10 firmly established its design philosophy, staying overhead for long periods to provide immediate support to ground troops in critical moments. The F-16 couldn't match it for survivability at low altitudes. A retired engineer from the Pentagon once wrote in the Wall Street Journal that the idea of using the F-16 for CAS was one of the Air Force's most misguided and deceptive mistakes. Subsequently, the A-10's status in the Army skyrocketed, becoming the spearhead, far surpassing the M1A1 tank, M2 Bradley fighting vehicle, M777A, 2155mm howitzer, and even the AH-64 Apache helicopter. With the A-10's powerful firepower, U.S. soldiers on the ground felt much more at ease, making it a morale booster. Thanks to this achievement, the U.S. Congress resisted pressure from the Air Force and kept the A-10 in service to this day. The Air Force quietly removed the gun pods from the F-16, and by 1994, the modified FA-16s were sent to the boneyard, with only the blue paint distinguishing them from the rest. However, the U.S. Air Force has not given up on its goal to retire the A-10. They once tried to reduce the A-10's sortie rate and mission readiness, while also refraining from upgrading it. Before the A-10C model was introduced in 2007, the A-10 lacked precision bombing capabilities beyond the Maverick missile. Pilots had to use their eyes, binoculars, or Maverick seekers to find targets. Before 2007, despite being a dedicated ground attack aircraft, the A-10 was the weakest in the U.S. Air Force when it came to locking onto ground targets. In addition to the F-16, the U.S. also tried developing the Textron Air-Land Scorpion light attack aircraft as a potential replacement for the A-10. The Scorpion could perform CAS, reconnaissance, and battlefield surveillance. It has a length of 13.87 meters, a wingspan of 14.58 meters, a height of 4.06 meters, an empty weight of 5.76 tons, a maximum weight of 9.63 tons, a cruise speed of 176 kilometers per hour, a maximum speed of 830 kilometers per hour, a service ceiling of 14,000 meters, and a range of 4,400 kilometers. Quite impressive for a light aircraft with a straight wing. The expected purchase price was under $20 million, with an operating cost of only $3,000 per hour, compared to $12,000 for the A-10 and $25,000 for the F-16. The Scorpion was designed with a focus on reconnaissance and ground attack, featuring a composite fuselage with a 20,000-hour lifespan, medium aspect ratio wings, and a turbofan engine for long endurance. It has a 2.32 cubic meters payload bay, flexible enough to carry communications equipment, electronic warfare systems, reconnaissance gear, or fuel tanks, and 6 wing hardpoints for bombs, AGM-114 missiles, with a maximum payload of 2.76 tons. However, the Scorpion lacks a fixed cannon, and it may never be equipped with one in the future, as its nose and belly are reserved for optical and multi-role sensor equipment, such as a small radar like the APG-67. Images from Textron show that the Scorpion would have a spherical sensor under its nose, confirming its multi-role design, not just for traditional CAS, but also for ground attack and reconnaissance. As a result, the sensor equipment and multi-role bay became more important than a cannon. But for various reasons, the U.S. military did not purchase the Scorpion. According to a June 29th report from Mission and Will, the U.S. Air Force plans to retire the A-10 within the next 5 years. However, it remains unclear how they will replace the Army's CAS capability. Do you think the U.S. Air Force will be able to retire the A-10 this time? Leave your thoughts, and let's discuss.